So welcome everyone. Today we will start with what is insect pinning. A lot of people kind of fall into the trap of calling anything to do with animal preservation taxidermy. Taxidermy is in fact the arrangement of skin. So taxi means arrange, and dermy, just like dermatitis, means skin. And in order for you to do taxidermy, it means that you have to take the skin off of a specimen and then create a sculpture and then return the skin onto that sculpture because you're arranging the skin. So taxidermy is not a blanket term for all things preservation. It's a common mistake made. In fact, I often see on social media people saying that they're, an insect taxidermist, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's kind of the difference between saying you're a plumber when you're a mechanic. So what we're doing today is not taxidermy, it is insect preservation, also known as insect pinning or spreading. And we are doing it specifically for insects. And what I mean by that is different species fall into different categories. So we're not doing a workshop today or a seminar on arachnids or spiders, as spiders are not deemed to be an insect. An insect has specific features to qualify. So this is going to help you to understand what you can utilize these skills for at home. And I'll take you through how we identify what an insect is. So I've got my little trusty resource here. If you guys have our book or our ebook or our kit, you will have all of these resources inside your book. So the first thing we want to do is figure out what is an insect. And you might remember these charts from school. It's called a dichotomous key. And you essentially go through and you figure out whether something is a yes or a no. So we start with an invertebrate. So these are animals that don't have a backbone. And if you think about a butterfly, for example, a butterfly does not have a backbone. So we know that we're in the right family group. And this is quite a basic dichotomous key. If you were working in a museum or some sort of science framework where you're collecting data or research on, insects and things like that, this dichotomous key would go down by hundreds and hundreds of degrees and get very, very specific so that you can identify exactly what it is you need. Fortunately, we're just going to do a basic one and figure out if we're dealing with an insect or not. So the next thing is we want to move down into arthropods. So these are invertebrates that have jointed limbs and a segmented body. The exoskeleton is made of chitin. So within that, there's 4 groups. As mentioned before, we have our arachnids. 8 legs is a defining feature. Then we've got crustaceans. So they have 2 eyes, 2 pairs of antennae, and 3 different mouth parts. They are mainly sea creatures and have many legs. So we're not dealing with crustaceans. Some of you may have seen some really cool, like preserved crabs and things like that. The giant ones look amazing. The process to preserve something like that is really quite different than what we're going to be doing with our insect preservation. Then we go to myriapods. So we're talking about centipedes and things like that. So a specimen that has many, many, many segmented body parts and lots of legs. That's not what we're dealing with, which leaves us just with insects. And the insects have 3 well-defined body parts. So they have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. They have 6 legs, 2 antennae, and they'll always have wings. So there are no exceptions to that. And if your specimen, so whether that's a beetle or a butterfly, has these characteristics, you know that you're on the right track, and you know that what we'll be doing in today's seminar is the appropriate technique for those specimens. So to begin with, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to rehydrate your specimen. Unless you're out in the field collecting your own butterflies or beetles, or unless you find them fresh, you will need to rehydrate them. The reason for that is insects will often come papered. So they'll come wrapped in this sort of paper that is vellum, which is kind of like a smooth, almost baking paper style of paper. And the reason that you want it smooth is because you don't want it to damage your specimen. So they'll always come in this vellum style paper, unless it's a beetle, which we'll get into tomorrow night. But obviously butterflies or moths are far more fragile than, say, a beetle. So when you get your specimen, it's going to be really dry and it's going to not be very malleable. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm just going to open up my paper. And these sessions, they are interactive. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will cover them off as we go throughout this session. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my little butterfly out, and I'm also going to get my entomology tweezers out. There's a special range of tools that you need when you're doing your insect preservation. So one of the main things that we need in our kit is these guys. They're entomology forceps. They're also known as spoonbill tweezers. Some people, if you're into stamp collecting, you might also use these. And the reason that they're nice is because they have these flat edges. You definitely don't want to be dealing with, you know, like a pointed tweezer or a grip tip tweezer to handle your specimen, because it will damage the wings or the abdomen and thorax. And we're going to talk about the wings shortly because they're really fragile and they lose their color very quickly, and there's a very good reason for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my grip tip, my entomology forceps, and I'm just going to show you how dry my specimen is. So I'm just going to pick my specimen up. I always try to handle my specimens with tools and avoid touching them with my fingers. So when I pick up my specimen, I'm just going to give the thorax a bit of a squeeze, and I'll show you in a second what the thorax is on our resource. And when I squeeze it, you're probably just going to hear a crunch, and the wings aren't really bouncing at all. They're very stiff. They're not bouncing at all, which means that these wings aren't going to want to come apart and spread. So if you were to try and pin this out now, all the wings would just break off of your specimen. So we have to go through a process of rehydration. And to do that, I'm going to need an insulin syringe, and we're going to inject a little bit of water into the abdomen, and then we're going to go through a rehydration process. Now, I'll just show you our butterfly resource. So when you're working with a butterfly, there are parts of the anatomy that you need to familiarize yourself with. You'll always be utilizing those parts of the body, and we're going to be talking about them often in tonight's session. So the first component is we have the head. Obviously the eyes are there and the antennae are attached there. Then the next part that we have is the thorax. So this is the most robust part of the body. And then the final component is the abdomen. So butterflies, moths, any type of insect will always have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. So these are the three defining body parts. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get an insulin syringe with some water, and we are going to just inject the tiniest amount, like a mil, into the abdomen, just to speed up some of the rehydration process, and also just to kind of inflate the abdomen a little bit. Often when they're dried, the abdomen will shrink. So we just want to bulk that up a little bit. So I'll just get my insulin syringe. And all of the tools that you're going to see in tonight's session come in our kit if you purchase a kit. Otherwise, we have these tools available on the website. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill a little bit of liquid into my syringe. I'm just using a cold water in this instance. We do sometimes say that you can use a warm water, but you would never really want hot water. I always avoid hot water when it comes to anything really with animal preservation. So I've just filled up my insulin syringe, and then I'm going to grab my specimen, and you just need the tiniest amount to go into the abdomen. And we just want to insert, I'm just going to pull off camera for 1 second, just so I can see my syringe. And then, oops, just squeeze some of that out. All we're going to do is then, oops, just 1 second. Just grab another little guy. Hard doing it off camera. You guys will be right up close when you're doing it at home. I'll just grab this guy. Right. So I'm just going to put my needle into the abdomen, and I'm just going to squeeze just the tiniest bit of water until you can just see a little bead of the liquid coming out the back of the abdomen. You really don't need a lot at all, but it is going to help to plump up this little abdomen so that it looks less flat, and it's going to give you a better looking specimen in the long run. So what we do then is we just put it back into our vellum, and then we want to rehydrate our butterflies for 24 hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my rehydration chamber. Any container that is airtight will do. So we have these really nice glass containers that we use at RIP that will come in your kit. But you could use something as simple as, a takeaway container. As long as it's airtight, it's not a problem. So we are then going to take these rehydration sheets. Now we're using a linen sheet. And the reason that we're using linen is simply because we just want to reduce our environmental impact, really. You can use paper towel, but because we rehydrate so many specimens and, make pieces for our online store and what have you, we like something that's reusable. So we use linen. You can use paper towel, not a problem. Or, like I said, these guys will come in our kit. So what I do is then I'm just taking a little bowl of cold water and I'm soaking my linen sheet in it. And I just want my sheet to feel damp. So I don't want it to be dripping wet at all, just damp. And then I'm going to lay that into the bottom of my chamber. And then I'm going to just pop my specimen in like so. And then you're basically just making a lasagna. So you're going to like wet another cloth. Make sure that it's not dripping. And then we're just going to put on another layer. I tend to just do one specimen per layer. I don't like to pile them too much. Butterflies are really fragile, so you don't want to be having too much, I guess, too many piled on top of each other, just in case, you know, when they're rehydrating, they do start to get damaged. So I'll pile one and then do a layer of sheets. And then if I wanted to, say, rehydrate 3 or 4 because I knew tomorrow that I'm going to pin them all out, I would just layer them. So insect and then my sheet. So then we would close this off and we would wait 24 hours. So we say 24 hours is about a rule of thumb for a butterfly. And then we tend to go around 48 hours for something like a moth. Moths tend to have really robust thorax and abdomen. So they're usually a lot thicker. And therefore it can take a little bit longer for the rehydration process to take place. What I'm going to show you now, though, is how you can tell if your specimen is rehydrated. So before I do that, I'll just jump on to questions. I've got one from Jessie. Are we aiming for the existing hole of the abdomen? What if we don't get in the hole? Jessie, with your insulin syringe, it's not a problem. They're really quite sharp. So you can inject anywhere in the abdomen. It's not a problem. Just be super careful and gentle, because when your specimen is not rehydrated, it's really brittle and has a tendency to want to snap or break. In fact, I broke the abdomen off of my first specimen because I had it too far and couldn't see what I was doing. At home, when you're using your practice specimens, don't worry, because I'm going to teach you how to do repairs. These things happen. Sometimes they fall apart. You can essentially repair most things on a butterfly, other than a torn wing. Don't tear the wings. That's going to take practice. Okay, so if you're using paper towel, is it just one sheet, not folded over? You can fold the sheet over. That's not a problem. Just make sure that your paper towel is not dripping wet. You just want it to be moist. If it's dripping wet, it'll soak the specimen too much, and it can also create too much humidity in your chamber. You don't want to create too much humidity, and you don't want to leave your specimen for too long, as in don't forget about it and leave it for days, because it will go moldy. Essentially, you know, it's like a fern house or a greenhouse. So it's just trapping that heat and trapping that moisture, and the specimens will go moldy. So I'm going to pull out some that I have rehydrated for 24 hours, and I'll show you what we're looking for. Okay. So I've got some nice swallowtails rehydrating in my chamber. We'll have a little look. Alrighty. So this guy's been in for 24 hours, maybe slightly less. So I'm just going to open my paper up. And you can see here, I've got some antennae that have come off. That's totally normal and not an issue. We will be repairing that in a second. What we want to look for, however, is you'll remember when I grabbed my dried specimen with my entomology forceps. Forceps is just a fancy word for tweezer, really. So when I grabbed my specimen before, the thorax was really crunchy. This time, however, when I pinch my thorax, can you see how the wings are pumping open? Can you see that in the camera? That's going to tell you that you're ready for pinning, because you can see that there's some flexibility in this specimen now, and the wings are going to want to move. So this to me is a really well rehydrated specimen. I'm really happy with the amount of bounce that it's got in the wings, which is perfect. So we're going to work on this specimen today. Okay. So what we'll do is we might start with our repairs. So I'm going to get just got a glass slide here. This comes in the kit, but you don't need glass slides at home. We just do it because it's easy for us to then chuck them out with our glues on them without making a mess everywhere. So what I'm going to do, and hopefully my team have opened it. Yes, they have. This is just a standard super glue. Nothing fancy. You don't need an araldite or a two-part epoxy or anything like that. This is just a standard super glue that comes in the kits, but you can really use anything. It's not a problem. Even just, your little 40-cent tubes that you get from like a $2 store is not a problem. You always want to be using a super glue when you're doing your repair. We're going to be using a PVA glue later before we do displays for reinforcement. So we'll be using 2 different types of glues, but for 2 different reasons. So for your repairs, it's always going to be your super glue. Now I'm going to get my pointed tweezers and I'm going to just grab my antenna. Now I'll show you something cool in our resource, and it's just about the antenna between a moth and a butterfly. And it's a cool resource because it is a really quick reference to help you determine whether you have a moth or a butterfly, because the rule of thumb really isn't like, oh, it's pretty, therefore it's a butterfly, or, it's got darker colors, therefore it's a moth. That's not how it works. Some of the most beautiful specimens I've ever seen happen to be moths. The easiest way to determine if you are dealing with a butterfly or a moth is based on the antenna shape. And so you'll see with a butterfly, they have this bulb at the end, which is exactly what we have here. So you should be able to see that little bulb at the end, yeah? Versus a moth that will have this feathery, saw-edged antenna. And it's really, moths' antennae are really cool. They look amazing. So that's always going to be your easiest way to tell what specimen you're dealing with. And you can always look the specimen up close. So we've got, a magnifying glass in your kit, and then, you can get a really good look and get up in your specimen and really see what you're looking at. So that's a neat way to identify whether you're dealing with a butterfly or a moth. So there's 2 ways that I like to approach repairs. It really depends what you're comfortable with. You can either grab your antenna and you can put the end right in the glue like so, and then attach it to your head. So just being really patient and holding it into place like so. Or it really depends what you like. My team all do it different ways. I'll take a dressmaker pin with just a colourful head because they're quite easy to grab. And also we're going to be using a few different pins for our pinning. So I always like to use colourful one for glue so that it doesn't get confused with any of the others. So then I'll just take a little bit of my glue on the head of my pin. I like to do it on the pin because then I know that I'm not collecting too much glue. You never want to use too much super glue. It's counterintuitive. If you use a lot of glue, it won't stick. So less is more when it comes to using super glue. If you ever do our skeletal articulation workshop, less is more. If you start going nuts with the glue, it just will not hold. And I know that we've got some people online tonight that have done that class who have had that very experience. So I would just take a little bit on the head of my pin, and then I will just dot it onto my head like so. And then, of course, you will then just hold your antenna on. Another trick is that you can just give it some gentle breathing. So just blow on the glue so that it sets. And the reason that we do that is because oxygen helps to set the glue. So if you ever are working on something delicate, just by giving it a few, breaths of air, it'll often then just help with the sticking process. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch it. I'm going to get one where the antenna are already attached, and then we're going to start pinning it. But you get the point here. Now, with your repairs, some people will say, my legs came off. Should I be putting them back on? It really depends on the kind of display that you want to do. Often the displays that we do get displayed in a shadow box, or they get displayed in, let's say, a dome like we have behind here. And I'll pull these samples up closer at the end. And therefore, it can look a little bit strange sometimes if you have legs everywhere. So we quite often will actually pull the legs off before we display it, just because it will give you a cleaner finished outcome. But that is up to you. If you wanted to do, say, a more anatomically correct pose, depending on if you're making a diorama or a habitat, you might want all the legs and you might want them displayed how they should be. In that case, you can use the same technique with the glue. Now, all the techniques that we're teaching you in terms of the pinning, they are the universal standard. So when I first started insect pinning, I didn't realize that there is a protocol that is the same all across the world. And the reason for that is because if you work in a museum or a university environment where you need to collect data, which means information from the specimen, there's a particular way that the specimens have to have been pinned so as not to interfere with the data. And we will be teaching you that protocol today on the butterflies and again tomorrow with the beetles. One thing you wouldn't do, however, in a university or museum environment, in case there's anyone watching that does come from that background that is wanting to learn this for the purpose of data collection, is you would never do a repair on a specimen that you have from the field. The reason for that is adhesives and things like that will interfere with the true data that can be collected from that specimen. So what you would do in a museum or university environment is you would take, the antenna and you would put it in, a glass case next to it or a liquid vial or what have you. And that would be placed next to that specimen so that it could be referenced and referred to. You would never do a repair. But the idea behind this session is that we want to teach you how to make beautiful specimens that you can create in the comfort of your own home. But we will, as we go through, just talk about some of the differences in, protocol in case you are wanting to do it for scientific reasons. Okay. No other questions at the moment. That's great. So I'm just going to get out another specimen. Now, when you get your specimens, often they'll have quite a strong smell. The reason for that is they get preserved in something called naphthalene, which is essentially mothballs. So mothballs have a really strong smell, and the purpose for that is to prevent your butterfly from being eaten by other insects. Go figure. So they'll usually have like quite a strong scent. That's normal. That smell will go away once you rehydrate. So that's not a problem at all. So let's just have a look at this one. His antenna are intact. We'll just make sure that his wings are pumping. So we just want to grab the thorax. Yep, we've got some nice bounce there. So I'm going to use this guy for our demonstration today. Okay, so I'll grab my pinning boards. Now, if you buy our kit, it comes with these flat pinning boards, and these ones are really great because they're adjustable, which is exactly what you want, because you want to be able to adjust the size of this groove so that it allows space for your abdomen and your thorax to sit comfortably. So these are great to have adjustable ones. Like I said, these come in the kit. They're also available separately on the website. But we also just got in these cool other type, which we've been testing, that have a slight V shape to them, if you can see that, which just means that when you're pinning, you're going to get a bit more of a V shape in the wing rather than a flat wing. Flat wings look great for a shadow box, but if you're doing, say, like a dome or something like that, you might want more of a V shape. So we also just got these in, and they're great. So we've been trialing these lately for some different ways to pin our specimens out. Essentially, the technique is exactly the same. It's just that what the wings will be laying on will either have a little bit of a V shape or a flat shape. So we have these available. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to open up my adjustable pinning board. Can you use foam as well? So yes, you can use like a styrofoam block if you want. You just need to cut out a channel. So I actually have one here that I can show you, because we do that sometimes if we have some old foam or we're running out of pinning boards. So I might just get Cam. Do you mind to pull over the specimen that we've pinned in the foam block over there? Thank you very much. The great thing about insect preservation is you don't have to have, this full set of entomology tools. Entomology is the study of insects. We're just doing one component of that, which is the pinning process, the pinning and display process. We aren't entomologists unless you're actually studying insects. But you don't need to have all entomology supplies. There are lots of things that we'll talk about that we're using today that you could substitute for something that you have at home. If you do want all the supplies, like I said, it all comes in the kit, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you did want to use a foam that you might have at home, or, from packages for Christmas or what have you, by all means, reuse whatever you can. So you can see here, we've just used a scalpel and we've cut out a little V channel. And then that's allowing our abdomen and thorax to sit comfortably in the channel, and then allowing our wings to be spread out flat. So you absolutely can use foam if you don't have a pinning board. Okay, so when you're adjusting your pinning board, you don't want to have it too wide because we don't want to have a massive channel or groove. You can call it whatever you want. I don't think there's actually a technical word for it. So you don't want to have the board spread too far apart, because then when we put our specimen down into the groove, it's going to be far too wide either side of the body. And that means that then the wings are going to droop right next to the side of the abdomen and thorax, and we don't want it to droop. So we want our channel to be just wide enough that the thorax and the abdomen can just sit snugly inside this channel. We don't want it to touch it, but we want it to just have the tiniest little amount of room either side. So I'm just going to eyeball this. If you want as well, you can use a little ruler and just measure the body out. So this one's about 0.5 centimeter or so. So then I could, measure that out. It really depends on how pedantic you are. I like to eyeball a lot of stuff. It just saves a lot of time. So I'm just going to check the size of that. And I'll just be off camera for a second while I test that. Some things are a little bit tricky to do when I'm right up close under the camera for you guys. My eyesight got so much worse with all the Melbourne lockdowns. I think because I was just looking at the screen all the time and not going out at all. Okay, so once you choose your channel size, we're just going to fasten our wing nuts. Now, the reason that I always touch my specimens with my entomology tools, such as my entomology forceps, is because butterfly wings are actually clear. So they are covered in millions and millions and millions of things called scales. And scales is what gives the wing color. So if you rub the scales off, the wing is completely transparent underneath. So if I actually I can use the specimen on the foam. Where did that go? Oh, can I have the specimen back on the foam? I'll show you. I'll rub a little bit off the wing and it's translucent underneath. And I think that that's really cool, but frustrating, because if you knock your specimen the wrong way or what have you, you'll actually knock the scales off. And this is one of our reject butterflies that we pin out because we use them for other things. So I'll just show you this. If I use my finger, can you see how I've got scales now on my fingertip? So that's actually what gives the specimen color. It's just these tiny, tiny little scales, millions and millions of them. And now you can see the area of the wing. See here? It's completely clear underneath. And this is why we never want to be touching our specimens with our fingers, because we want to be trying to treat them with as much care as possible and using the right tools. So I think that that's a really cool fact about butterflies. And certainly, I mean, I love learning about this stuff. You just go down rabbit holes and you learn the coolest stuff. I didn't really have a huge love for insects before I started pinning and teaching and writing books and things like that, but they're just fascinating creatures. Snails, actually, even though they're not an insect, snails are one of my favorite animals, and you would not think that. I know so many fun facts about snails now. You don't want to see my Google history. It's like not right. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into our pinning. Now, I said to you that there's a standard protocol used everywhere around the world, and I'm going to show you what that is. I'm just playing a little bit of table Tetris so that everything looks nice on camera for you. So let's have a look at this. And like I said, all of these illustrations and material is all in the book. We have a scientific illustrator by the name of Madison Mayfield. She's based in the United States and she does the most incredible illustrations. She also used to work at the Queensland Museum doing taxidermy. She's really phenomenal and very, very talented. So you'll see here that when we pin a butterfly, the entomology pin, which is the special pin that we're going to use, is going to go through the thorax. It never goes through the abdomen. It's always dead center going through the thorax. Whereas on a beetle, which we'll be doing tomorrow night, and I know that most of you are booked in for that, on a beetle, you can see that we have the head, the thorax, and we have the abdomen. So it's actually always to the right side of the abdomen. No matter what museum collection you go to anywhere in the world, it will always be pinned to the right side of the abdomen. And we'll go through that tomorrow night. So the protocols with butterflies are always through the thorax. And then there is a particular shape that will be achieved with the wing. So the forewing will be up, the hind wing will be down, and it will create this nice little V shape. And you'll see that the base of the forewing is parallel to the thorax. So this is standard across all collections. So that's what I'm going to be teaching you tonight. Even if you're just doing a beautiful display for home, this is always going to turn out to be a beautiful style of specimen. Once you've had a few goes at this, if you want to go rogue and, you know, pin it slightly differently to give it some character, or you've got an idea in mind, it's not a problem at all. Go for it. But we do encourage you to learn the standard protocols and then go nuts. You know, the cool thing about animal preservation is really the only limit is your imagination. So we make all kinds of weird and wonderful things and just have the best time doing it. So we hope that you guys go off and create beautiful things after this session. Okay, so we're going to be using an entomology pin. So we're not going to be using our dressmaker pins. We'll be using them for around the wing. But the pin that we're going to be using is one of these guys. I'll just see. Cam, do you mind taking that, please? Thank you. All right, so entomology pins come in a range of different sizes. I like to use a size 3 for a, I guess, a normal sized butterfly. If you're doing like a teeny micro butterfly, you can go down to like a 00, a 0 or 1. So what the number refers to is the size of the pin. Now, not the length of the pin, but the thickness of it. So this is a 3, and here I have a 5. So I'll pull out a 5 for you. Riley's just asked, can you preserve snails? Yeah, you could. You'd have to plastinate the body though, in order to preserve it, but you could plastinate it. One of my teachers who works for us, who teaches the corrosion casting, Gavin, he runs the veterinary science lab at the Sydney University, and he does a lot of corrosion casting and plastination. He did the plastination, he did like workshops aligned to Body Worlds. And you might know like some of Gunther von Hagen's work and stuff like that using plastination. So you'd have to plastinate a snail body in order to make that work. Okay, does it have to be an entomology pin? Yes. it does have to be an entomology pin, and I'll take you through the reason why in a second. So you can see here I've got a size 3 and a size 5. They're the exact same length. They're always going to be the same length, but hopefully on camera, you can see the difference in the thickness. So this is the 3 is thinner, and the 5 is thicker. If you go down to a 0, it's going to be really, really, really fine. And we use it for like teeny tiny butterflies and teeny tiny beetles, which we might be able to show you tomorrow. We've got some really like little ones, smaller than like your pinky nail that we pin, much to the dismay of my staff. They hate pinning the little ones, particularly when I ask them to do it open wing. They hate that, which is fair enough. So entomology pins, the size reflects the thickness of the pin. So we sell a range of, I think we sell 1s up to 6 or 7s. I've never really seen it go beyond a 6 or 7. You really wouldn't have a specimen where you'd need a thicker pin than that. Now, the reason that you want a entomology pin is because they're stainless steel. That means that when you're inserting it through the thorax, any of the viscera, so the internal organs, isn't going to make the pin go rusty and therefore damage your specimen. So you always want to be using a lovely entomology pin to go through the thorax on a butterfly or moth, or the abdomen on a beetle. You never want to use a dressmaker's pin for that. They also have a little head on the end of them that make them easier when inserting them into the thorax of the specimen. So today we're going to use 3s. Tomorrow when we do our beetles, we're going to be working on some stag beetles tomorrow. They're really cool. We'll be using a 5 because they've got that hard wing covering, the elytra, and it's really hard to get the pin through it, and you'll never get a size 3 through a beetle. That's why we go with a 5 for what we're doing tomorrow night. But for now, a size 3. And then what I'm going to do is grab my specimen, and I'm really hoping it hasn't dried out too much from all my talking. I might just grab a fresh one because you wouldn't be doing so much talking. And they do actually dry out quite quickly. Again, I'll just rehydrate this one because I'm going to show you 2 pinning techniques today, just so that you've got a bit of variety to do at home, and then you can test what works for you. And you can also mix and match when it comes to beetles, which I'll explain a little bit better to you tomorrow. So let me just keep that one soaking for later. And let's just check this one's okay to go. It's really quite warm in Melbourne at the moment as well, so you get a little bit less time to work with your specimen if it's warm. Yep, okay, that's bouncing. That looks good. Okay, so what we want to do is grab our entomology pin. We're going to take our specimen and give it a squeeze on the thorax. Now, you do still have to be careful of the outside wings, but they don't actually contain the scales. The scales are on the inside, but you can still really easily damage the back of the wings. So you always want to be grabbing just the thorax, and you don't want it to grab too high up on the thorax, because if you do, you'll pin the wings down and then they're not going to pump. So you can see that I've got the wings open now just from pressing the thorax. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my entomology pin and I'm going to push it straight down at a 90-degree angle into my thorax. And you want it to be straight, because when you put your specimen into the groove, you don't want it tilting either side. So I'm just going to pull away from the camera so that I can see what I'm doing. And essentially I'm just pushing my pin straight down And I'm just going to adjust that because it wasn't quite 90 degrees. Okay. So now I've got my pin. Let's see if you can see that. Yep. You can see my pin is now at a 90-degree angle through my thorax. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my grip tip forceps. They're just called grip tips because they've got these little teeth on the inside. And I like them because it makes it easier to grab the head of my pin to hold and to push into my channel. So when you're putting your specimen into your channel, you've got to remember that you're going to be bending these wings up. So our forewings are going to lift up. So you don't want to come really high up here because then you're going to hit your wing nut. So we want to kind of put it like a third of the way down the board. And I'm just going to push the pin into the groove, and it's spinning and carrying on, which is always fun when you're on camera, but it is what will happen to you at home, so it's good to see. All right, my pin's in, which is lovely, and I'm just going to straighten it up using my tweezers, never my hands. Okay, great. Now when you get our kits, we give you 10 butterflies included, and I think 2 stag beetles. Yes, 2 stag beetles. So with your 10, they're just assorted, and they're usually like about an A- to B grade kind of specimen, and they're great for practicing. So you'll see with these ones, there's a little bit of, you know, damage on the wings and what have you. This is why they're fantastic, because you can just have a go at pinning, try different techniques, things like that. We also then have, you know, your fancier specimens available, which is, say, something like this gorgeous, gorgeous Ulysses. And you buy these ones individually. So they're more expensive, and that's because they're just stunning. And we have a range of special ones like this. So it's always really good to be practicing on your cheaper specimens, because if you, the first few times you do it, you're going to tear wings. You know, I mean, I've done this 100 times. I might even tear a wing on camera tonight, probably. So practice as much as you want on your assorted, and then when you feel ready and you want to make a really beautiful piece, invest, you know, the $10 or the $20 or whatever it is on a specimen. I mean, some specimens are a few $100s, not that I buy them, and not that we sell those type either. But it depends on the rarity. So save your special specimens until you've had a few practice goes. Okay, so what we want to do is we're now going to set our pinning board up. We've got our butterfly sitting in the channel, so that's looking good. So now I'm going to get my strips of vellum. So this is how ours come. They're 3 centimeters wide, and they come in a pack, and you can just take them off and you can use these for your pinning. So these are really good. They're all cut to size, ready to go. If you don't have these and you don't end up getting a kit or buying these from us, you could just cut up baking paper at home. It's the exact same thing. So baking paper has one soft side, and you want it to be soft and shiny so that it doesn't rub the scales off of the wings, which I just showed you. So you don't want something that's going to be rough, and you also want it to be transparent, because that's going to allow you to see underneath and see what you're doing. So this is the way to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take my entomology paper, and I'm going to just use 2 pins to secure it to the top of my board, like so. And I want it to be right next to the channel. So I don't want to, you know, have a big gap. And I'll show you what I mean. Actually, probably, if you were smart, do your paper before you put the butterfly down. In fact, I might do that now. I think that is how we have it in the book. I've just gone rogue because I haven't taught for so long because of COVID. So this will make more sense. Set your pinning board up first. That makes way more sense. Okay. And on mine, you can see that I've got these strips hanging off the edge. Me personally, that's going to drive me nuts. So I'm going to use the scissors in my kit and I'm just going to cut that off. And then I can use these smaller strips for something else. Always try and reuse your tools, not just to keep your costs down, but it's better for the environment. And you can always reuse the entomology paper. Just turn it over because when you're putting the pins through, it's kind of going to be rough on one side. So if you spin it the other side, then it will be flat and you can just keep reusing the paper as often as possible. So I'm just going to go back and put my entomology pin back into my groove. And definitely do it in that order at home. But like I said in our book, it's that way anyway. This was just human error on my part. All right, I'm just going to have a drink and see if there's any other questions so far. No other questions, that's good. Okay, so what we're going to do now is when you go to start adjusting your wings, this body's going to want to move around. It always slides around. It's going to drive you nuts. So I'm just going to check my body. When you put your specimen into the groove, you want it to sit parallel. So you want it to be far down enough on your board. Far down enough on your pin to ensure that the thorax and body are parallel with the pinning board. So if I have a look at this on its side, my body's not kind of up here at the top of the pin. I want it to be parallel. You can see the pin there. I want it to be parallel with my board and not sitting up too high. So I've just adjusted my butterfly down. And then what I was going to say is this body is going to want to twist and turn and carry on. It's going to drive you nuts. So I like to secure the abdomen either side of the body. Just using 2 dressmaker pins. We're using dressmaker pins because they're not actually going through the specimen, so it doesn't matter if they're like lower quality. And this is just going to hold our body into place, which is what we want. So now we can take our setting tape and we are going to lay it over our wing. And then we always want to be grabbing our butterfly by the main vein. So a butterfly's wing has a few different parts in it, but when we are grabbing our wing to move the forewing, so the top wing, the forewing, we always want to be grabbing it by this main vein. And the reason for that is there's this strong vein that runs at the top of the forewing, so the top of the top wing, the forewing, and it's where the air, it's like a little pipe and air goes in it, and that's how they can flap their wings. So it's actually quite strong. So we want to be grabbing our top wing by the main vein. We never ever want to grab our wings from the edges. They're really, really fragile on the edges, and you will forget that, and you will rip pieces off of your wing, and you're going to get really, really frustrated. You always want to be grabbing by the main vein. And then when we're dealing with the hind wing, so the bottom wing, the lower wing, the hind wing, there's no main vein on the hind wing. So you just have to remember, again, not to grab it on the edges. You want to be grabbing it more so in the middle of the hind wing. That's very important. Otherwise, you will tear little bits off and it gets very frustrating. But look, you only do it a few times and then you'll learn. That being said, I'll probably make a mistake right now. I always do when I'm on camera. Try to be the expert, and then if something goes rogue. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up my pin cushion. I've prepared one earlier. One thing you want to do, I know it seems silly, you don't want to be having a big container of pins and trying to get all your pins out, because you'll be doing something really finicky and you'll be fiddling through pins and just stab all your fingers. So always set your pinning cushion up, and we're going to then adjust the wing. So you can lift your setting tape up, and I'm just going to grab my main vein really gently and lift this wing up. Now, because we're using vellum and the paper's soft and shiny, it's not going to rub the scales off. So I've just slightly lifted my hind wing, and I'm just going to do 2 pins at the base of my specimen, and I'm just going to hold the wing in position. This is not going to be our final pose. This is just called a holding pose. So same one again. We're just going to lift the paper up, and I'm going to gently grab my, what have we got there? Can you guys see that? We've got a rogue leg coming through here. I'm just going to move that leg to where it should be, because that's going to give us grief otherwise. You can see what I mean by the legs go everywhere. This is why we tend to take them off. So just going to lift this wing. Just going to be really careful of that antennae as I'm putting the paper down. And we'll just do 2 pins. Again, like I said, it's just to hold it into position. So now everything's out of the way. It's looking nice. This does not look symmetrical at all, so this is not going to work for us. So what I like to do now is I'll like to pick up my original paper again. And we can start to adjust our wings. So I'm going to move the hind wing a little bit, and this specimen is really rehydrated beautifully. So it's making moving it really nice and easy. And then I can grab my main vein again. And if you remember, we want our forewing, so our top wing, to be parallel with our thorax. We want a nice little V shape in between the fore and the hind wing. And then our lower wing, it's really going to depend on the specimen. This is a swallowtail, so you'll see that it's got this cool little bulb at the end of the wing. exactly like a Ulysses does. A Ulysses is also a swallow type. So you'll start to learn kind of the families that butterflies sit under. You have other really beautiful ones like iridescents and things like that. Swallowtails are cool though. I really like them. And lots of them come in our packs for practice, which is nice because they're a little bit bigger. So I feel quite comfortable with the positioning of my wings, and it matches the protocol that we have on our resource of how this should be pinned for scientific and museum reasons. So I'm going to do 2 pins at the bottom. Because this is a swallowtail, I might just do another pin to secure my paper on the other side of just that cute little tail. And then I'm going to do 3 pins on the top wing. And then I like to do 1 pin in my V and just really hold that into position. So now what I want to do, I've got a question from Riley. Is the paper really holding it down tightly? Yeah, you'll notice, and I'll show you on the right-hand side when I do this wing. Whenever I'm handling the specimen, I'm always just pulling that paper tight or pressing it down. You want it to be quite taut so that the wings don't bounce around under the paper. So I'll just show you on this one. Now we had a question about mantis. Does anyone have an image of a mantis up? Because we can do it together. Because the rules for an insect were 3 distinct body parts. So head, thorax, abdomen, 6 legs, 2 antennae, and 2 wings. So if you have an image of a abdomen, I can't listen and talk. I just made up a word. I said abdomini, which is not a word. What do you need to say? I can't see that. Let's have a look, guys. Who's got the picture of the... Oh, okay. Yep. Does it have 6 legs? You can't say maybe. It either has 6 legs or it doesn't. If it's got 6 legs, 2 sets of wings, 2 antennae, and 3 body parts, it's an insect. I think you might be onto something. I think it might be. So this is where the dichotomous key really comes in handy, because you can then use this skill on, say, something like that. The only thing that I do slightly different on something that large, particularly if it was fresh, is sometimes they've got a lot of viscera because they've got a very large abdomen. So viscera is, like the internal organs. So the only thing I do, and I've seen this done on stick insects, is to make an incision with a scalpel in the abdomen, pull out with tweezers the viscera. So it'll just be like a little gut sac essentially, and then clean all that out, and then you can rehydrate it the exact way that we're going to do with the beetles tomorrow. So like warm water, and then even a little bit of alcohol will just get rid of any last little bits on the inside. And then you could just put the tiniest bit of cotton wool inside and glue it shut, and that'll just get rid of any of the viscera, and then you can just do the exact same techniques that we're going to be doing today. So that's the only difference I'll do with something a little bit bigger like that. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to do this other wing. So remember, you do not want to be, I'll just move everything up. You do not want to be grabbing the end of the wing because it's going to rip immediately. So I'm just coming in to the hind wing. Now I'm trying to make this symmetrical, like so. That looks pretty good to me. The hind wing is not looking the same at all. So I'm just going to adjust that. And I've got a little bit of a wrinkle in my paper. I don't want that, which is actually the perfect question because Riley, you asked about that. So now I'm just making sure that my paper is really nice and tight and holding that wing into place. That's looking, oh, not quite symmetrical. Can you see here? I've got this white gap of my pinning board on this side and not the other. So I'm just going to correct that. That's looking better. And you guys can be as finicky as you want. You guys will get fast at this too. You know, you can rehydrate like 10 butterflies the day before and just have a nice little pinning session. You'll get a lot faster. But obviously, because I'm demonstrating and talking and answering questions, it's taking a little bit longer. And we still, it's not quite symmetrical on this one. So you just redo it. It's not a problem. I'll just fix that one again. There we go. That's looking better. All right, so then the last thing we want to do for this pinning technique is we're going to do the antenna and or antennae. So depending on your specimen, the antenna is going to be sitting in all different ways. On this one, mine is sticking straight up. Can you see that? So they're sticking straight up. They're these guys here. Don't know if that's making it better or worse. Yep. Sometimes when you're pinning, they'll be like straight down in the chamber. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a cross pin. Cross pins, it's not really a technical term. It's just really simple. You're just crossing them. We're going to do heaps of cross pins tomorrow night with the beetle. So many cross pins, you're going to be over it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trap my antennae down. I'm going to work upside down if that's okay with you guys, just so I can see a bit better. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trap my antennae down with a cross pin. Gets a little bit fiddly because you've got all these other pins. It's kind of like a game of Operation. Did anyone play that game when they were young? I loved that game. I'd be so bad at it now. My hands shake all the time. Now, that is not symmetrical at all. What I'm going to use, this little guy. This is just like a teeny tiny little makeup brush. It's so good with the antennae because it really allows you to move them around. Oops, my bad. Move them around gently and pin everything into position. So I'm just going to trap one of these. There we go. That's a bit better. And move this around. My head's a bit twisted, which happens sometimes your head. You'll notice it when you're working on your own specimens. So one antenna is kind of sitting on the wrong side. There we go. And I'm going to trap that down. So I've just done a cross pin so that my antennae are starting to sit a little bit nicer. And now you can see them coming over my paper and I can start to get them into position. I really do like using the paintbrush to adjust them. You do run the risk when you're using your tweezers, even if it's the grip tips like I just did, you do run the risk of snapping them off because they're very brittle. So I do tend to use just this. It's just a cute little trick that we like to do. So this is pinning technique number 1. What we might do is we might just take a super quick 5-minute break. If you want to grab a drink, what have you, we'll come back at let's come back at 7:35. I'll give you an 8-minute break. Then what we're going to do after the break, we'll go through more questions and we'll take you through another pinning technique. So I'm going to teach you one using setting strips. And then I'm going to show you some butterflies that we have pre-pinned that have dried out and are in position. And we will unpin those and I'll show you how to display them in a shadow box. Once you kind of know how to do it in a shadow box, you're going to be absolutely fine for you know, the other displays that you want to do at home, if you want to do a dome or something like that. So we'll come back at 7:35 p.m. if you're in Victoria or New South Wales, and we'll see you back then. Okay, welcome back, guys. Quick little drink break. How are we all finding the insect pinning so far? The thing about insect pinning is it's really not that difficult, but if you don't know what you're doing, it can seem really unapproachable, or it's really easy to make mistakes. But of all of our workshops that we teach, it's one of the easiest ones. It's just a little bit finicky because, you know, it is easy to tear wings and things like that, but you will get better at it. But all in all, it's really not a difficult form of it's not a difficult form of animal preservation. And you can make so many beautiful things. Like, it's one of the workshops that we do where you can just go away and create so many fabulous things that are really diverse and really different, and people love them. People love having displays in their home and things like that. Even my own partner, she's not super into taxidermy, which, you know, I'm a taxidermist, so that's not great. But she said to me even yesterday, she's like, oh, can you make me like an insect thing for my birthday? So I think sometimes with the insect preservation, you can find a sweet spot with people where they don't maybe think it's macabre or weird or what have you. So you're going to be able to go nuts after this and just have a really great time making stuff. Also a great ISO activity. If you're in New South Wales or Victoria, you probably have COVID or you're close contact or something, and we've been in lockdown for forever. So great activity to do at home. We just had COVID, actually. We're just getting over it. So we were hoping to dodge that bullet, but we did not survive another year, unfortunately. We dodged it for the last 2 years, and then Omicron got us, which sucks. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to teach you a second pinning technique. The setting tape that we used for our first technique, that's kind of the standard in museums. The next technique I'm going to teach you, though, is with this setting paper, or like cardboard. It's more like a cardboard, not a paper. Now, it's shiny on both sides in this case because this is special RIP board, pinning board. But you can literally just cut up, you know, your Wheat Bix box. Just make sure that the side that you press onto the wing is the shiny side, because on a, you know, cardboard box from home that you have your cereal in, it is going to have that really rough matte finish on one side, and you don't want to be pressing that onto your scales because the color will come off. So we're going to use this technique. Actually, Cam, do you mind? I might just start with a clean pinning board just because it'll be better on camera. For you guys at home, you would be doing multiple, no, a flat one, not a diagonal. Thank you. You guys would just do multiple specimens on the one board. You know, even this one, I probably could have moved a little bit higher up. I just didn't want to for the purpose of the demonstration. So I could probably fit 3 onto a board if I'm lucky. And then that way, you know, you only need to have a couple of boards at home and you can, you know, smash out a whole range of specimens all at once. Thank you, darling. So I am going to use this lovely new board. We'll open our wing nuts. Now, while I do that, I learnt this really cool thing about butterflies. I didn't think it was true. I think I was passing through Singapore on the way to the States. I spent a lot of time in the States working there. Well, I used to. And a friend of mine, oops, taken that one too far. A friend of mine said, oh, there's this like kind of butterfly garden at the Singapore airport. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, I'll check that out when we have our stop. And it's really cool. Like, you go into this netted area at the airport and there's butterflies everywhere, but there's also this little section in the middle that has all the butterflies and cocoons that are going through their, you know, metamorphoses. And my friend said to me, oh, if you cut open a cocoon when the butterfly or, the caterpillar is going through its metamorphosis, the inside of the cocoon is just filled with liquid, like it's a goop. And butterflies completely turn to liquid before they, become butterflies. So caterpillars turn to liquid before they become butterflies. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so crazy. So I went down this rabbit hole, and it's true. So first of all, they basically go from being a caterpillar, turn completely into goop, except for essentially they just go down into one cell, and then they from that cell then grow into a butterfly and grow legs, grow wings, grow all of that sort of stuff. So it's true, if you cut it open, it's just liquid for a period of time inside the cocoon, which is crazy. Or the chrysalis is what it's called. So interestingly, going down that rabbit hole, I found out that there was some testing done recently where they had caterpillars smelling tobacco plant leaves, and then they would go through their metamorphosis of turning completely into goop and then growing from this cell. It's called a disc, growing from this disc, and forming their limbs and what have you, their legs and antennae and all that sort of stuff. And then when the butterfly would come out, they would give the smell of the tobacco plants to them, and the butterflies would have the same reaction that they had when they were caterpillars. And so they found that the consciousness of the caterpillar was somehow being transferred into the butterfly, even through the goop phase where they basically ceased to exist. And I just thought that that was the coolest thing, that consciousness can travel through this goop stage. It's so cool. It's only very recent research, but I just thought that that was so fascinating. We've just got a question here from Sinead. Is it true most butterflies live for only 15 days? Yeah, the life cycle is very, very short. So it's the same with like stag beetles, and we'll talk about them tonight. They spend years underground, and then they only live for a couple of days. And essentially it's just to eat and then shag and breed, and then the whole thing starts again. So yeah, we don't get a lot of longevity out of insects. Okay, so what we're going to do is we will do our second pinning technique. I soaked my specimen again. I thought we might do the Ulysses. It's missing its antennae. And I'm not going to glue it back on just because I don't want you to sit here while I'm holding antenna on. But I want to pin it because it's so beautiful. So I'm hoping it's rehydrated enough because it was sitting out drying. So we'll find out. We'll do the old squeeze technique and check it out. So, and it would be, I'll secure the antenna on tomorrow. It's not a problem, but doesn't make for good viewing. You guys just watching glue dry, does it? So let's see. Ulysses is such stunning specimens. Now, we always get asked where we get our specimens from. So we work with some people that run butterfly farms. So they run butterfly farms to release them into endemic areas. Endemic means the area that they're kind of native to. So if populations are dwindling for whatever reason, people run butterfly farms to release them there to try and get breeding to be taken up in that area to help the populations. So when those pass away, they get papered and sent to us. So the ones that you get, that's where they're coming from, but always good to know. We get asked lots and lots of stuff about that all the time. So we will give this guy a pump. I think he's going to work, so that's good. Now, I don't need to set the board up for this one because we are using our strips, so we don't need to pin anything down to begin with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my number 3 entomology pin, And I'm going to place it at a 90-degree angle in my thorax, exactly like I did on the first one. And I'm just going off camera. So you can see the pin sticking right up at the moment. Can you guys all see that? It's coming up quite nicely on the beautiful blue. And then I'm just going to use my finger to push that straight down. And you want to have about maybe a centimeter, like the head sitting about a centimeter above the thorax. You don't want to push the pin right down onto the thorax because then you won't be able to adjust the body up and down. So I've got my pin in there about a centimeter above the thorax. And now I'm going to get my grip tip forceps. I would do any repairs that I needed to do as well, but like I said, I'm not going to make you watch the glue dry. And I'm just going to grab the head of my pin and then push it down so that my thorax and abdomen are parallel with my board, like so. That one can probably go even a little bit further down if I'm being perfectly honest. You want to get it parallel because you don't want to have a ripple in your wing. You don't want to have the body up too high and then be pushing the wing down flat because you'll get like this ripple. That's the same reason that you don't want the groove in the board to be too wide. Okay, that's looking nice. No questions, that's good. You're a quiet bunch, which isn't a bad thing. Okay, so there's two ways that I like to approach my setting setting card. We like this one sometimes because sometimes the specimens can be a little bit bigger, a bit more robust, and therefore the wings can be just a little bit firmer. Like we do a lot of death's head hawk moths. Well, we used to when we could get them in stock. It's a bit tricky at the moment with COVID. But their wings are quite thick. And we find sometimes that this card can just help pin them into place rather than the tape. But sometimes you can also mix and match. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Once you know these pinning techniques, just do whatever suits you best. And you might just like one technique over the other. So we're going to be doing our card in a second. But first, and I nearly forgot, is we need to pin either side of our body. If you forget this, your body will swivel and it will drive you up the wall. So just putting it, oops, no, I'm not, but I will be. I'm just putting these pins either side of the abdomen. Lovely. Now, you can either grab the card and hold it on the side like this and just come straight down the middle and push the wing into a holding position. I find that quite easy. Ooh, having a hard time with that pin. So I'm just going to pin that card into place. This is just a holding position. And then I'm going to do the other on the other side, or probably shouldn't put that in my mouth. I'll probably swallow it. Or you can use your entomology tweezers you know what I've done? I've never actually done that, but this is a good point for when you're doing it at home. Yeah, I don't know how I've never done that before, but it's a good learning. So my pin that's on the side of my abdomen, I've put it a little bit too high up. And what's happening is when I'm trying to now bend my wing down, it's hitting that pin. Can you see that? So that I've made a mistake. So I need to just move my pin back a little bit. And I've just adjusted that pin back. So it's still holding my body either side, but hopefully now it's not going to be in the way of my wing. And if it is, I can just adjust it onto an angle. So rather than my pins coming up like this, either side of the body, I can just bend them back slightly so that the wings aren't going to hit it. I've never done that before, but no doubt if you're practicing at home, this is potentially something that could happen to you. That's much better. So that's fixed the problem. So I'm just going to flatten the wing down. And again, this is another way you could do it is just by using your spin wheel tweezers. You learn something new every day, guys. Is there anyone on the session that's actually done any insect pinning before, or is this your very first time to see it? Sinead just asked what sort of butterfly this is. This is a Ulysses. They're so cool. They're beautiful. Other ones that have like this nice blue but are really like shiny, they're called iridescents and they're stunning. We're hoping to get some in soon. We've just had some supply issues, obviously, with COVID. It's a nightmare. But iridescents are beautiful. And butterflies are so cool because usually there's a reason that they're colored the way that they are. And, you know, usually it's, you know, to attract a mate or to ward off predators or what have you. So it's really cool to start researching different insects and finding out why they do have the colors that they do. So I think that that's really cool. Okay, so I've got my, and I've just seen here a lot of people saying it's their first go. Yeah, it's such a beautiful art. You guys are going to have the best time. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, this is just a holding position, doesn't look good, it's a mess, and it's definitely not meeting our protocols. So if you remember from our resource, where are we? It's always the last page you go to. We need to get our forewing parallel, so 90-degree angle to our thorax, like so. And then we want to create our nice V. And then the hind wing, it doesn't matter like where it sits. It really depends on the species. Sometimes it's going to be more up to the side. Sometimes it's going to be lower. What matters is that you're getting this nice V and it looks symmetrical and it looks good to you. The hind wing placement isn't really part of the protocol, but the forewing and the V, they are part of the protocol. So at the moment, this is all kinds of wrong. So I'm going to lift my top pin. I can leave my bottom pin where it is at the moment, and then grabbing my main vein and not the tip of my wing, I'm going to adjust. And it's got to come up quite high to get to that 90-degree angle. There we go. So I'm just going to pin that. Yep. And then Oh my gosh, that's a really bad habit. You can't really teach people when you've got pins in your mouth. Don't do that at home. If you do it, don't tell me. It's such a bad habit. All right, so then we're going to adjust this hind wing. Again, never grab the edges of the hind wing because it's where they're most fragile, yeah? That's wanting to pop out a little bit. What I'm going to do, and this is the cool thing about insect pinning, because depending on the specimen that you're working on, sometimes you need to change it up. So what I'm going to do, because there's a little bit of weight in these wings, so they're not really wanting to play ball. So what's going to help me is if I flatten the wing here next to the channel, and then that's going to keep everything secure where the wing is attaching to the thorax and the abdomen. It's going to keep all those veins at the top wing, the forewing, really in place on this specimen. And then that's going to make my moving a little bit easier. So now I'm going to just take this one completely off. And this is a pretty shit butterfly joke, but I just thought of it. The cool thing at home is you can just kind of wing it. That's really bad. Oh my God. Oops, that was such a dad joke. Cam's shaking her head at me. Oh dear. No, we've just had to isolate for 2 weeks together. I think she hates me. We might have to get a divorce. COVID's been interesting, huh? With relationships. So many couples have gone down the drain, so much lockdown and so much ISO now with everyone catching COVID.
Someone just made a comment that they had multiple specimens that they like scorpion, mantis, and sissy, but they haven't quite gotten them right yet. Maybe transfer to school.
Yeah, are you coming tomorrow night to the beetle session? Because the skills for beetles are super transferable for the specimens that you're talking about. Beetles are quite different to this, but you will definitely learn things in the seminar tomorrow night that will really help you. So if you are, and if you're not, you can tap into that ticket as well. But I think most of you bought the 2-night pass, so you're stuck with me. Okay, so you can see on this side, by adding this setting card just closer to the channel, it's just allowed me to work more freely with the wings. And because this is a bigger specimen and the wings actually feel thicker than they felt on the swallowtail, and you'll start to see this sort of stuff when you're at home. It just needed a bit more support to get it into place. So I'm not sure if I'm completely happy with this wing at the moment, but what I'm going to do is work on the other side. And once I've worked on the other side a little bit, then and tried to create symmetry, then I can start to do my final positioning. So I'm just going to move this hind wing out of the way. And I've got quite a big gap on this side. Like you can see quite a big, white triangle. I'll just have to pin the other side of the body again. So that it doesn't rotate. There we go. So I'll just match that up slightly and then decide if I want it closer to the channel or not. And look, there is no right or wrong, guys. There is only what you like, and there is symmetrical. If you don't do your specimen symmetrical, you will be annoyed when you unpin it. Even the slightest difference in symmetry can look really quite strange, particularly if you're doing just say like one specimen in a shadow box. If one wing is lower or higher than the other, it just never quite looks right. So it is good to try when you're pinning to get them looking as beautiful and symmetrical as possible. So I'm going to make some adjustments here, grabbing their forewing, getting to my 90-degree angle. Then I'm going to put my card down like so. And then I'm going to grabbing the middle of my hind wing, never the edges. I'm going to try and make that symmetrical with the other side, making sure I'm getting a nice V in there. Now I've just done two slightly different techniques. So this one I've got coming in on a V, and these ones I've got coming down. You could also on this side add another piece here so that the wings don't curl as they're drying. So we can do that. And this is what I mean by you can start to wing it and mix and match techniques. So you can see I've got 3 and that edge of the wings down. If I wanted, I could do a small one here. I do want to get a pin in my little V just to make sure that these wings don't move around. So we might do something like this. And what we could do on our tape, and I'll go back to that one in a second, just show you what else we can do. Smaller specimens may not need as much card, but with these guys, sometimes you'll find, particularly if it's humid, I'll find that if I don't pin the edges of the wings down as well, and you don't want the pins to go through the wings, obviously, you're pinning around the wings. I'll find if it's humid that sometimes the specimen will dry and then the wings will curl at the end. So sometimes it can be helpful to pin the edges down as well. Now, if you had antennae, don't forget you're going to do your cross pins and just position them into place. I will attach the antennae tomorrow. Like I said, I don't want you watching glue dry because that is boring. So this is this second technique, and you can see we've just done some pins at the bottom. We've done a pin in our little V shape between the fore and the hind wing, and we have pins at the top, very similar to our first technique. We've done pins either side of the body, then we do our cross pin to taper the antennae down or up, depending on how they're sitting. So this is technique 2. I'll just jump back to technique 1. Now, I think this specimen would be absolutely fine, but we did have some little scraps that we cut off, if you remember. So this is when they might come in handy, would be to just tape down these sides. I don't think this will curl, it's not big enough, but if you wanted to just be extra cautious, you could just tape those ends of the wing down, not a problem. And you can also mix and match if you wanted to do this, that's fine. We're actually going to use some of the technique from the setting tape tomorrow on the beetle, because tomorrow we're going to do a closed wing and an open wing beetle, and the open wing beetles look so cool. So we're going to actually use some of this technique tomorrow and mix and match this onto the beetle. Okay, so what we'll do now, I'm going to clean up my workstation a little bit. And if you've got any questions, hit me, because I'm just going to clean up a little bit, and then I'm going to show you how to unpin and how to display your specimens. And we'll just do a really super basic display, and then we're done for the evening. These sessions usually go for 2 hours. I just allowed for 3 for questions and tech issues and stuff like that. Although Cam's brilliant. She's been doing such good tech all week, so I'm really appreciative. So we've got some questions coming through. So Amy said, is there any issues using fresh specimens, or do they need to be preserved in naphthalene so they don't deteriorate? Fresh specimens, absolutely fine. If you can't get to them then and there at the time when they're still going to be maneuverable and bouncy and have the wings be able to be pinned out, then what you can do is just put them in a takeaway container in the freezer. You don't have to put them in the paper if you're going to do that. So you could just keep them stored frozen, and then when they thaw out, there'll be enough moisture in them to be able to be pinned. So that's something that you could do if you are collecting them in the field or you found a specimen. If you find one, often it might have been out in the elements for a while, so it could be quite dried. And in that case, I would probably make it a little chip packet, and I'd make that out of like a baking paper at home and do it that way. If you wanted to put in a little bit of naphthalene, a little jar of it, or even just some mothballs or something in with it, not a problem. You might see sometimes on vintage specimens that, you know, bugs get into them or what have you. So it's good to try and do your displays in like a sealed shadow box or, you know, a sealed dome. If you ever find at home that little bugs are getting into your displays, not that we do with any of ours, but, you know, sometimes you've got really old vintage stuff or you find cool pieces when you're out, chuck them straight in the freezer. So that's actually what people do in museums. If any domestids or carpet mites or little bugs get into collections, whether that's taxidermy, your butterflies or your beetles, just throw the whole thing into a freezer. If you've got a chest freezer, perfect, and it will kill any bugs that are in there with it. So that is a good technique to save your specimens. Yes, so we've got, how long are you leaving them pinned out? Is the idea that they will dry out in the shade? So Riley, yes, great question. So what we're going to do now, as I'm cleaning up, we will go into our unpinning phase, and you want to let your specimens dry for about a minimum of 24 hours. You can let them dry for as long as you want. We've got some specimens pinned out here that, I mean, they've been pinned out for a couple of months just waiting for us to find the time to do something with them. But you want it to be about a minimum of 24 to 48 hours. And the reason for that is because you want the wings to sit exactly how you have pin them into position. Same with the antennae. So they have to dry up again. And once it's dried, it's going to be as fragile as it was before you rehydrated them. So you've got to be really careful when you're unpinning them and displaying them, because you don't want to have done all this beautiful pinning and work and then, you know, right on the last hurdle when you're displaying them, you know, break them or have it fall apart or the antenna come off. So that one. And then, have you ever used bits of butterflies in other pieces? Yes, I have, Bryony. I will get my partner to bring down a piece that I made and I'll show you what I made with it. So I'll show you that at the end. Do you want to grab Pablo's blue jay from upstairs? Thank you. The blue bird. Yeah. Okay, we've got a message here in regards to a tiny mantis. It's really going to depend on the size. If they're teeny tiny, there's not going to be much viscera on the inside. When we get to the stage where we have to like make an incision, it's often on like quite, your big stick insects and things like that are going to contain a lot of viscera inside the abdomen. If it's a teeny tiny fella, it really won't be necessary. It's very unlikely that would rot. If you are concerned, what you could do is when you inject the abdomen, you could do a little bit of alcohol as well, which will dry any like tissue out if it's just the tiniest bit. Be careful with that though, because it will also make your abdomen more fragile. Alcohol just dries things out. So you wouldn't want to use too much. You could use like a metho or an isopropyl or something like that to inject in if you are worried and you don't want to take the leap of faith of, using the scalpel and getting it out. Is it possible to book into? Yep, absolutely. If you haven't done booked in, that's not a problem. You can jump onto our website and you can just book for the night too. That's not a problem at all. Okay, so I'm pretty much set up. Oh, okay, I've got this to show you. So I made, it's a bit dusty. This is a, oh no, how are we going to do that? I'm getting the spotlights. Oh, Cam's hiding the nut. We're getting all the glow. Oh, she's just turning the lights off. That's good. This is a bird that I made completely out of butterflies. So it's not a bird, it's a sculpture. And I made every feather out of butterflies. So each, actually you can see close-ups of this on the website and I'll post it a little bit later, but this is made of about 60 spare parts of butterflies. So, I mean, like I said, your imagination is really the only limitation to what you can do. When I first started, I certainly didn't think that I'd be making birds out of butterflies, but I got asked to exhibit for Melbourne Fashion Week, and then they didn't want me to do taxidermy because they didn't want their brand associated with fur or feathers because they thought it'd be controversial, but they wanted me to do something out of butterflies. They wanted me to have like moths coming out of a closet or something. It was dumb. And so I kind of got cranky and was like, well, these things have all died, naturally. So what's the difference? And, between butterflies or fur or feathers. And I'm like, well, if they're not going to let me put taxidermy in, then I'm just going to try and smuggle it into the exhibition. So it's the real skull of the bird and the real legs. And then the rest I made out, like carved myself and made out of butterflies, just kind of as a hoo-hoo to Melbourne Fashion Week for not letting me do taxidermy. So that's how that concept came about. Yes, Jessie, it has been on Insta before. Thanks, guys. All right, we're going to do the last bit of the session. And then, like I said, we've got the books, ebooks, kits available, specimens, whatever you need to do this at home. Otherwise, hopefully I've shared some things that you can use at home so that you can do this, because it's not just all about getting it from us. We just try and make life easy by putting it in a pack for you. So these guys have been drying for a few weeks. Like I said, the only thing is got to be at least 24, 48 hours. And you can check when you're unpinning if the wings are moving. If it is, just repin it and let it sit, because you don't want that. So let me just get all my supplies, Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to unpin. I will always remove the pins closest to my specimen to begin with. So you want to remove the pins for the antennae, and then the girls didn't seem to pin either side of this abdomen, so I'm going to leave that. But you'll see here, see how this abdomen is sticking up? If they had have pinned that down into place, that wouldn't have been happening. So actually that's an oversight by my team. So we could have done a cross pin to get that abdomen down, and that would have looked a lot better for our display. Right now though, because this specimen is dried again, it's far too fragile. If I try and push it down, it's going to break. So that's why you want to be doing, you know, a cross pin or securing that body so it's not moving. But also if it's sticking up, cross it down, cross pin it down. So once I've removed my antenna pins and my pins from the side of my body, then we can just take them from all around the edges. And obviously we've used 2 pieces of the tape here because it's a very, very large specimen, this one, but it is a butterfly because I can tell from the shape of the antennae. So I'm just going to take all my pins out. People might think that, you know, this is a moth because of the coloring and the size, but it's not. But now we know that because we learned our cool trick with the antenna. So I'm just using my grip tip forceps. They're really great for picking up the pins because they do have those teeth on the inside so they don't slide around on the pin. Oh, Sinead just said she's bought a kit. Well, you are going to have some fun this weekend. Once you start, you're just going to get sucked in. It's a really fun art form. It's really cathartic too. And as long as you plan your time properly, like don't rehydrate more than you can pin the next day. So maybe start with like 2 or 3 if you want to do like a good afternoon session. And also because if you got the kit, you'll only have 1 pinning board. So you'll only be able to do as many as will fit onto your pinning board. So don't forget that unless you have excess boards available. And then if you get really into it, you can get extra boards and go nuts. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull my entomology pin out and just rest my specimen on the side like so. Now, what we'll do, we will do a mount in a shadow box. So I'll just show you how to do that. I will grab my shadow box. And we might also do some reinforcement. So can you get that out of the box? What I like to do, and again, you would not do this if it was for a museum or a university, is bring my toolkit up. I'll need that. I'm going to reinforce my specimen. I like to do this to make sure that my antennae don't come off when I'm mounting them. I also like to reinforce my body just to make sure that it's nice and firm because they can get more fragile as they get brittle. And like I said, you don't want to be kind of stumbling at the last hurdle. So this is just a PVA glue that you can get from any craft shop. I've got another colourful headed pin. I like to use different ones so that I'm not mixing my super glue with my PVA. And I will, there they are. Grab my specimen. I love the back of this butterfly. I think it's more gorgeous than the front. It looks so cool. And you could, depending on what you're trying to create, you could always pin an insect upside down, you know, if you wanted to showcase this side, or if you had the V board like we've pinned on here, you could showcase it, you know, this way. And yeah, you can see his little eyes. It's cool. And then the big loop that comes out of their mouth or their face is called the proboscis or proboscis, depending on what country you're from. And it's basically their tongue, and it's, you know, what they can like suck sap and nectar and things like that with. So it's this big kind of twisted straw, and it just sucks at everything, which is really cool. So that's how they eat or obtain nutrients. So what I'm doing is I'm getting my PVA glue, and then I'm going to just put some around my entomology pin just to hold that into place and make sure that it doesn't spin on my specimen. PVA is great because it looks white, but it dries clear. So you're not going to see that. And then if I wanted to just reinforce the wings, I can just put it to my attachment points on the thorax and abdomen. Did you have something, Cam? No? Okay. So this will just reinforce the attachment where the wing is. Don't get it on the wing. I figured out the hard way when I made my bird made of butterflies that if you get if you get glue on the wings, it burns them. And it makes them kind of go like a black or orange color, which is not cool. I learned that the hard way. Okay. And then if you want, you can reinforce your legs. You can rip your legs off, whatever you want. I tend to rip the legs off before I pin them. I find in this stage they're a bit brittle. And if I were to pull them off now, and it's not necessary with this specimen, it's quite large, you won't see the legs, but sometimes you do on a smaller one. I find if I pull them off now, sometimes you can damage the specimen a bit because the abdomen's really fragile and you don't want the whole tummy coming off. But because you know how to do repairs, if the tummy came off, you can glue it back on. So this will all set up. This is to reinforce the specimen. You can also do a little bit on the attachment between the thorax and the head. Whatever's necessary. This one feels really nice and robust and secure. But, you know, on a smaller specimen, you might find that it feels a bit flimsy and want to do a bit more reinforcing. Thank you, darling. So what I'm going to do now is, you got that shadow box out? Yes. And actually, we'll have to just put this in the Okay. So we get these shadow boxes custom made. I think IKEA may still sell some, but they have perspex. Ours have glass. I prefer glass. Perspex can get scratched really easily. So we have these custom made ones that we like, and they come in your kit if you get a display kit. But I believe that IKEA currently have some if you're based in Australia. So what we do is we take off the back of our shadow box like so, and get rid of our paper. And then the glass is going to be positioned at the back. That's just for packaging purposes. And then on the inside, there's going to be this frame. So we need to reverse this. We're going to put our glass at the front. Then we're going to put our frame back in like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add this piece of foam board. So it's a foam. It's like a nice white cardboard either side, but then it's got this squishy foam in it. It's called foam core. I think you can get this in sheets from Office Works, and then you can cut it to size to fit whatever shadow box you end up buying. Our kits come with this, and we have them pre-cut to size so that they fit perfectly. So yes, the foam core does come with our shadow boxes, because this is what you can mount your pin into, because normally shadow boxes just have this cardboard, really thick board, and you're not going to be able to get a pin in there. Plus it's an ugly color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just find the center of my, we got the ruler there, darling. Oh, yep. Going to find the center of my board. So that's 15 centimeters. I think these are 19. So that's 8.5, 9. So we're just going to go our halfway marks, and they're square. So it should be nice and easy. Okay, so we're just marking our box up. You can do whatever you like. Like we'll do all kinds of displays with lots of, insects, or sometimes, if you've got a really high forewing, it wouldn't make sense to put it right in the center. You might like to move it down so your forewing sits a bit higher. But essentially you just want to mark your board up like so. And then I'm going to get my specimen, and I'm going to push it into that mark that I've made. And that pin's going to come out the back of my board. So I'm just adjusting this one down into position. And then you can move it around with your entomology forceps to just get it into straight position. Again, it's exactly the same as when we were pinning. We don't want to be touching it with our hands. We want to be moving everything around. So I'm just going to get that loosely into position to show you. Then what you need to do is you need to get these diagonal cutters, and we're going to cut the pin at the back because we don't want that sticking up. And then we can use our pardon me, that must have been really loud on your end, sorry. We can use our super glue to just super glue the pin into place so that it doesn't rotate. And this is the same, like even if you're doing it on a branch or something, you could push the pin into the branch, or like cut the pin and then push the pin into the branch, or you could use a little Dremel and drill a little hole into the branch and then push the pin in. So just cut the back of the pin to however long you need. And we'll just secure that. Give it a blow to set the glue. And then our specimen, thank you, goes face down into our box, and we close it off. And then essentially that's, just a really, really simple way that just as a beginner, you can start mounting your own specimens at home. And then you can get really creative with, what you want to make at home. That's okay. I think that they can see that though. You can put the light back on. Thank you so much. So we've got all kinds of displays. This one happens to be beetles, but you can see that we've used it. Actually, we might turn that off. So you can see on this one that we might need both of though, just for this little bit. So we've got them on like branches. So you would do that the same way that I've just shown you. This is just a really simple display, like it's just straight up sticks. It looks really cool in a large dome. But then you can get really creative with habitats. And actually, Cam, I might get you to get me one of the butterfly ones on the stick. That black one, actually. That's great. So you can see, guys, you can start to do all kinds of displays, and but the technique remains the same. The only difference is, your imagination. So this one's got like 3. You can start creating habitats down the bottom, using like dirt and glue and stuff like that, or a little bit of moss. So you can really go crazy and create whatever, is going to work for you guys. Yep. So we'll do last minute questions, and then I guess I'll be seeing most of you tomorrow night. So can you also get black foam core? I haven't seen Riley black foam core, but there's nothing stopping you from spray painting the foam core up. We just use a matte black spray paint for the bases of our domes. And as long as you just do a few layers and don't like give it a light spray and just build up the layers slowly, then you won't get like weird drips and stuff like that, because black looks awesome. Make sure you got a really bright butterfly for that though, otherwise you'll lose some of the, characteristics. Rose said, are the legs irrelevant even in domes? For us, we find them to be irrelevant, but in saying that, if I was going to do, say, like a beautiful taxidermy competition piece, because we have Australian championships. In fact, we have a world championships of taxidermy that I've competed in. If I was doing a piece like that and maybe wanted the specimen interacting with a butterfly, I would want my butterfly to be more lifelike. So maybe with the wings up and the legs all out. So for something like that, I would want it to be anatomically correct, and I would pin all those legs into position. And that will, when we do the beetle pinning tomorrow night, you can see how I would use that technique to pin my butterfly legs out. But for more like artistic displays, we don't tend to use the legs, but it's totally up to you. Whatever you like is right. We've got another question here. Do you have any classes which talks about making specimens onto bones? I have a seahorse I'd like to turn into bones and piece together to make display. Yes, great question. So we will be relaunching our skeletal articulation workshops this year. Seahorses are a little bit different. I I mean, seahorses aren't technically bone from, need to think about that. But you're not going to find, like, seahorses are one component. They're not multiple, little bones or what have you that you need to articulate. So we're launching a skeletal articulation workshop of a minor bird, where we'll take you through the skinning process, how to clean all the bones, and then how to mount them. So that's coming. In terms of the dying to know sessions, which are these seminars and the books and things like that, we are launching shortly a skull cleaning book, and I'll be doing a dying to know seminar on that. So stay tuned, and we will be able to teach you in this forum. Yes. So this is the, lights. Thanks, Dale. This is a minor bird that's been skeletally articulated. I will just take off so we will be teaching that in person in our workshops in Melbourne. But in terms of a session like this and books and things like that, we'll be doing the skull cleaning. So that's the next book that I'm writing at the moment. Any other questions at all? I'll just see if any others come through. While I just see if there are any other questions, we created these dying to know sessions because we have always taught workshops in person, and then we found with COVID we were unable to do that. But also it's really nice to be able to reach, families, children, maybe people in rural areas, maybe it's difficult to get to a class or the expense is out of reach. So we're always working on ways to make our knowledge more accessible and different ways to share our skill set. I guess that's really where this Dying to Know series began. So we teach some things that we do in workshops, like this insect preservation is actually a workshop where you come and you do 8 hours with us. It's cool to be able to do it in this forum, and it's cool that you can then go and do it at home. But some of the other stuff that we do in Dying to Know, like our wet preservation, or like our skull preservation that we're going to be doing, they're not really suitable for a workshop because some of the things take weeks to do. So we can do it cooking show style in a seminar like this, where I can say, here's one I prepared earlier, and then walk you through what you'd be looking at. So I guess that was the crux of why we wanted to do Dying to Know, so that we are teaching all of the skill set that we have and trying to share that knowledge around, because there really aren't people that, teach these things in Australia. When we started, we were the first that taught taxidermy. So we just keep trying to branch out and bring new things to you guys. You'll also get an invite to the Dying to Know group on Facebook. So at any time you can pick our brains, ask us questions. If you're pinning at home, feel free to drop us a line and be like, Nat, I've got an issue. We're always around to help. So that's a private group for people that attend these sessions, so that you can kind of feel like you have a mentor, but also share your creations and, ask other people what they're doing, or see what they've created at home. So please don't feel shy, because I know that sometimes in forums you can get your head bitten off a little bit, or everyone says that, their way is the right way. The truth is, if you make a beautiful specimen and it's preserved correctly, then that is the right way. So always don't be frightened to play, always play and learn. Any other questions at all? Do you just pick up dead animals off the road, or where do you get bird skulls? Yes, these are really complex questions. I run a Dying to Know on rat taxidermy. We'll also be doing a baby chick one. So come to those sessions, because there are a lot of legalities around animals, particularly in Australia. So we will go into that in depth in those sessions. I'll be booking one in the coming weeks, so come join us for that. If you prefer hands-on learning, we also run those workshops in person. You can jump on site on the website and see the range of offerings that we have at the moment. But in terms of ethics, the rules around native animals, introduced species, things like that. It's quite complex. So please come to one of the taxidermy workshops or one of the taxidermy dying to know sessions, and we will absolutely cover that off for you. Any other questions? Okay, well, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for coming, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really excited to see what you do at home. It's not a difficult form of preservation. It's just, learning some of the skills so that you don't feel frightened to try it at home. You want to have the confidence to do it at home. So I hope that we've given you that tonight, and we're really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow night.